On today's Fast Friday, we're going to take a look at how the X-T5 handles colors a bit differently than other Fujifilm cameras. Hi everyone and welcome to Pal to Tech. As you know, the X-T5 is a significant change over earlier models such as the X-T4 or the X-T3. And that's not just because it has a 40 megapixel sensor. It is also using the brand new X-Trans5 processor. And this affects everything from how the camera operates to how the film simulations are applied. So I recently did an interesting test that I want to share with you. I took the exact same photo in both an X-T4 and an X-T5. Now for the setup, I used only a 5600 Kelvin color temperature lighting with the exact same setup for both cameras. I set a custom white balance for both cameras to 5600 Kelvin. I also made sure that all of the image quality, JPEG processing settings, etc. were zeroed out on both cameras. I kept my dynamic range at 100% and all settings on both cameras were identical. I shot both RAW and JPEG files in the highest quality, and I took two photos. One of them was shot with the ProVia film simulation, and the other one was shot with classic negative. Now, let's take a look at the results. Right now, we're looking at the straight out of camera JPEG. The X-T4 is on the left, and the X-T5 is on the right. What's interesting is that if you zoom in, the X-T5 is slightly more saturated. You see the red tone here versus here? However, looking at the white areas overall, I would say these are almost identical. And just so you know, classic negative is an interesting film simulation as it tends to add more warmth to the highlights and cooler tones to the shadows. And it just seems to me that the X-T5 colors are a bit more punchy. You see that right here versus here? Again, this is the classic negative film simulation straight out of camera JPEG. Let's take a look at the other one now, ProVia. Okay, so I'm zoomed in about 100% here. Have a look at the X-T5 right here. You see that it is slightly cooler with the colors than the X-T4. Let me zoom in even further. It's not a huge difference, but it's definitely there. I'm noticing a bluish tint on the X-T5 right here and here versus the X-T4 here and here. And there's no question about it. The X-T5 has slightly more saturated colors. I mean, just look at this compared to this. So under the default film simulation of ProVia, the straight out of camera JPEG, the colors on the X-T5 are definitely more punchy and saturated. What about the RAW files? Okay, we are looking at ProVia now, imported straight into Capture One. Now keep in mind that Capture One has applied the ProVia profile to it. So it demosaicked that file into its version of ProVia. And that is always going to be different than the straight out of camera JPEG's version of it. And that's the whole interesting point here. Check this out. These are pretty much identical. The same amount of punch to them, the same amount of saturation to them, everything. And remember that I haven't applied any effects, nothing at all. They are exactly straight imported into Capture One, and this is the difference between the X-T4 and the X-T5. And here's the RAW file for classic negative, and it's the exact same thing. Identical. Absolutely no difference at all when it comes to how Capture One is reading the raw data and translating it into the film simulation. It is looking at an X-T5 file and an X-T4 file identically. So other than being interesting, what does this mean exactly? Well, the in-camera processor definitely affects film simulations. They are not the same between all versions of the camera. For example, the X-T4 has a very different film simulation process, even for the same film simulation, than the X-T5. The X-T5 renders ProVia and at least classic negative with a little bit more saturation, a little bit punchier of a final image than the X-T4 and most likely the X-T3. But it's what happens with the RAW files that's the most interesting and the reason I made this video. And that is RAW files. They're just your raw sensor data. That's all they are. Just the data off the sensor, okay? And it is up to the individual editing program to translate that raw data into what it thinks Velvia looks like or classic Chrome. And Lightroom has a different version of that than Capture One or any of the others. And what's interesting to me is that apparently, I guess, some developers over at Capture One said, well, if it's the same raw file coming with the same film simulation from the X-T5 versus the X-T4, Make them the same, exactly. But Fujifilm apparently decided to do it differently. Their straight out of camera JPEG from the X-T5 is different than the X-T4, even with the same film simulation. And I think part of that has to do with the new processor, right? The X-Trans 5. And I think part of that has to do with just little tweaks that Fujifilm makes behind the scenes to their film simulations. Now, due to time, I didn't test the other film simulations, but it would be interesting to take a look at those as well. My guess is that across the board, most of them will be more saturated, slightly more, in the X-T5. It's just a guess. This is interesting stuff, and I thought I would share it with you today to get your weekend kicked off right. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you found the video helpful or at least entertaining. And if you did, be sure to give it the like and subscribe. I'm going to be signing off now, but have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you in a new video next week. Take care.